ready to dive into one of the most captivating stories, I think, from the Bible.
Oh, absolutely.
The tale of David and Bathsheba.
Yeah.
We've got a king, a forbidden love, a war, and a cover-up.
All the ingredients for a good story.
This deep dive is going to be intense.
What's so intriguing about this story, found in 2 Samuel 11, is how it reveals the human capacity for both good and evil.
Yeah.
Even in someone considered a hero, like King David.
Absolutely. The story starts with a seemingly simple detail.
Okay.
It's springtime, the time when kings typically go off to war.
Right.
But the text specifically says that David stayed behind in Jerusalem. What's the significance of this?
Well, it immediately sets David apart from his soldiers, right?
Right.
And it raises questions about his leadership. Why isn't he with his army leading the charge?
Yeah.
It suggests he might be detaching himself from his responsibilities.
Interesting. So David's hanging back at the palace.
Yeah.
And one evening, while strolling on his rooftop, he spots Bathsheba bathing. The text emphasizes that David found her very beautiful.
Right.
It's almost as if the author wants us to understand the intensity of David's attraction.
That's a key point.
Yeah.
The narrative doesn't just state he saw her.
Right.
It highlights her beauty and the immediate effect it had on him.
Yeah, I've always been curious about rooftops in biblical times.
Yeah.
What was their significance?
Well, they were often used for socializing, even sleeping, especially during warmer months.
Okay.
Think of them as semi-public spaces where people gathered.
Okay.
They weren't necessarily considered completely private.
That helps paint a clearer picture of the setting.
Yeah.
But regardless of the context, David learns Bathsheba is married to Uriah the Hittite,
Right.
a soldier in his own army,
Yes.
and he still sends for her.
Here we see the power dynamics in play. David, the king, acts on his desire, seemingly without considering the consequences,
Yeah.
or Bathsheba's perspective.
Bathsheba goes to David, and she becomes pregnant. Let's talk about a complicated situation. What happens next?
David, realizing the gravity of the situation, tries to cover his tracks.
Okay.
He summons Uriah back from the battlefield,
Okay.
hoping he'll sleep with Bathsheba, making the child appear legitimate.
That seems pretty clever, though morally questionable.
Yeah,
Did it work?
not at all.
Okay.
Uriah turns out to be a man of incredible integrity. When David suggests he go home,
Yeah.
Uriah refuses, stating,
Right.
"The ark and Israel and Judah are staying in tents,
Right.
and my commander Joab and my lord's men are camped in the open country.
Yeah.
How could I go to my house to eat and drink and sleep with my wife?
Wow.
As surely as you live, I will not do such a thing."
Wow, that's an incredibly powerful statement.
It is
Uriah's loyalty to his fellow soldiers is unwavering.
unwavering.
It seems like David underestimated him.
Yes, Uriah's response throws a wrench in David's plan.
Yeah.
It highlights the stark contrast between Uriah's steadfastness
Right.
and David's increasing desperation.
So what does David do next? Does he come clean?
Unfortunately, no.
Okay.
He tries to get Uriah drunk, hoping he'll change his mind.
Okay.
But Uriah still refuses to go home. It's almost like you can see David's moral compass going haywire.
Yeah.
He becomes so fixated on self-preservation
Right.
that he's willing to manipulate Uriah,
Yeah.
one of his most loyal soldiers.
It's fascinating how the story highlights these two characters' starkly contrasting choices.
Yes,
It makes you wonder if David ever considered just confessing his actions.
that's a great question.
Yeah.
The text doesn't delve into David's internal struggle,
Right.
but it's certainly something to ponder.
Yeah.
Ultimately, David chooses a much darker path.
What does he do?
He sends Uriah back to the battlefield with a sealed letter for Joab, his general.
Okay.
The letter contains a chilling order
Okay.
to put Uriah in the most dangerous part of the battle
Oh, wow.
and then withdraw, leaving him vulnerable to enemy attack.
He's essentially ordering Uriah's death. That's a deeply disturbing turn of events.
It is.
How could David, known for his righteousness, stoop to such a level?
This is a pivotal moment in the story.
Yeah.
It shows the extent to which David is willing to go to protect his reputation and cover up his sin.
It really makes you question his character and motivations.
Yes.
Does Joab carry out this awful order?
Yes, sadly, he does.
Wow.
The text goes into quite a bit of detail about the execution of this plan,
Yeah.
almost as if the author wants us to understand the gravity of what's happening.
So we're left with this unsettling image of Uriah Dying on the battlefield.
Yeah.
A victim of David's deception.
Right.
What happens next?
The messenger returns to David, recounting the battle and Uriah's death in detail.
Right.
There's this fascinating detail where Joab instructs the messenger on exactly what to say to David, anticipating the king's potential anger and preemptively deflecting blame.
It's like Joab knows exactly how to play the game of courtly politics.
Yeah.
He understands the king's mind.
Right.
Sure as he doesn't become the scapegoat.
Exactly. It speaks to the complex power dynamic between them.
Yeah.
Joab is a loyal general, but he's also shrewd and self-preserving.
And how does David react to the news? Does he show any remorse?
He maintains his composure, even comforting the messenger. He says, "Don't let this upset you.
Right.
The sword devours one as well as another."
It's chilling.
Yeah.
He orchestrated this man's death and acts as if it's just another casualty of war.
Right.
It seems like he's gotten away with it.
For now, perhaps.
Okay.
But the story doesn't end there.
Right.
The text tells us, "But the thing David had done displeased the Lord." This sets the stage for what happens next.
Yeah.
The consequences of David's actions.
That line always stood out to me.
Yeah.
It suggests that there's a higher power at play,
Right.
judging David's actions,
Absolutely.
despite his attempts to conceal them.
And that's where the prophet Nathan enters the story.
Okay.
He confronts David, not directly, but with a brilliant parable.
I love how the Bible uses parables to convey profound truths.
Yeah.
What's this one about?
Nathan tells David a story about a rich man with many sheep
Okay.
and a poor man who cherished his one little lamb.
Okay.
When the rich man needs to feed a guest,
Yeah.
he takes the poor man's lamb instead of sacrificing one of his own.
That's heartbreaking.
It is.
Highlights the injustice and selfishness of the rich man's actions.
Right.
How does David react?
He's furious, demanding justice for the poor man. He declares that the rich man deserves to die for such a cruel act.
He completely misses the point of the parable, doesn't he?
Yeah.
He's so focused on the external injustice
Right.
that he's blind to his own transgressions.
That's precisely the brilliance of Nathan's approach.
Yeah.
He then delivers those unforgettable words.
Yeah.
You are the man.
Wow.
He connects the parable to David's sin with Bathsheba
Okay.
and the murder of Uriah.
What a powerful confrontation. How does David respond to being so directly exposed?
He doesn't try to deny it or make excuses.
Okay.
He simply says, "I have sinned against the Lord."
Wow.
It's a stark admission of guilt and a crucial turning point in the narrative.
It's interesting that even after all he's done, David still seems capable of recognizing his wrongdoing.
It speaks to the complexity of David's character.
Yeah.
He's capable of great sin,
Right.
but also of genuine repentance. Nathan, however, makes it clear that while God acknowledges David's repentance,
Yeah.
there will be consequences.
What kind of consequences?
Nathan delivers a series of pronouncements.
Okay.
He says the sword will never depart from David's house, indicating ongoing conflict and turmoil.
Right.
He prophesies that calamity will arise within his own family.
Oh, wow.
And most devastatingly,
Yeah.
he declares that the child born to Bathsheba will die.
That's heavy stuff.
It is.
It seems like David's sin has set off a chain reaction of suffering, impacting not only himself, but also those around him.
It underscores the idea that our actions have ripple effects,
Right.
often extending beyond ourselves and impacting those we love.
It also raises questions about the nature of divine justice
Right.
and the limits of forgiveness.
What happens to the child?
Yeah.
Tragically, the child becomes ill and dies within a week.
Wow.
David grieves intensely, refusing food and comfort.
Right.
His servants are confused by his deep mourning, asking why he grieved so intensely while the child was alive,
Right.
but seemed to accept his death.
That's a really interesting reaction.
Yeah.
It seems paradoxical.
David explains, while the child was still alive, I fasted and wept.
Right.
I thought, who knows?
Yeah.
The Lord may be gracious to me and let the child live.
Right.
But now that he is dead, why should I go on fasting? Can I bring him back again?
Wow.
I will go to him, but he will not return to me.
That's a poignant reflection on grief, loss, and acceptance. David recognizes the finality of death, even as he deeply mourns his son.
It reveals a depth of human emotion in David.
Yeah.
He's not just a king or a sinner.
Right.
He's a grieving father experiencing profound loss.
So where does Bathsheba fit into all of this? What happens to her after the child's death?
After a period of mourning, Bathsheba gives birth to another son.
Right.
Solomon.
Solomon, of course, becomes a renowned king,
Yes.
known for his wisdom.
Yes.
But didn't Nathan say that calamity would arise within David's family,
You're right.
and that the sword would never depart from his house?
Right.
And those prophecies unfold tragically in the later chapters of 2 Samuel.
Yes.
David's sons, Amnon and Absalom,
Right.
become caught in a cycle of violence and betrayal.
Right.
Amnon rapes his half-sister Tamar,
Right.
and Absalom, driven by a thirst for revenge,
Yes.
murders Amnon.
It's a level of family drama worthy of a Greek tragedy.
It is.
Power struggles, lust, and vengeance tear the family apart.
Exactly, and it's all connected to the consequences of David's sin with Bathsheba.
Right.
His actions have unleashed a series of events
Yes.
that have devastating consequences for his entire family.
It's a stark reminder that our choices have lasting impacts, not only on ourselves, but also on future generations.
Yeah.
Even though David repented,
Right.
he still faced severe repercussions. It raises questions about the nature of justice, mercy,
Yeah.
and the complexities of forgiveness.
Right.
These are themes that have resonated with people for centuries, inspiring countless works of art, literature, and theological debate.
It's amazing how this story, written so long ago,
I know.
still manages to speak to us today.
And that's the beauty of these ancient narratives.
Yeah.
They tap into universal truths about human nature.
Right.
Our capacity for both good and evil, our struggles with temptation and forgiveness,
Right.
and the enduring consequences of our choices.
I'm really curious to explore those broader interpretations of the story. It's clear that there's much more to uncover beyond the surface narrative. It's fascinating how a story like this, written thousands of years ago, continues to spark debate and inspire new interpretations.
Exactly. The story of David and Bathsheba isn't just a historical account.
Right.
It grapples with these universal themes of power, temptation, and the complex relationship between humanity and the divine.
Yeah, one of the most debated aspects is David's character.
Right.
He's often hailed as a, man after God's own heart.
Yeah.
Yet he commits adultery and orchestrates a murder.
Right.
How do we reconcile these seemingly contradictory parts of his story?
Well, that's a question theologians have wrestled with for centuries.
Yeah.
Some argue that David's story highlights this concept of divine grace. The idea that even those who sin gravely can find forgiveness and redemption through, sincere repentance.
So despite his flaws, David's willingness to acknowledge his sin and seek forgiveness makes him a model of repentance.
For some, yes.
Okay.
His heartfelt confession, "I have sinned against the Lord,"
Right.
resonates deeply.
Right.
It shows a capacity for humility and self-awareness,
Mm-hmm.
even in the face of immense guilt.
Others might argue that David got off too easy.
Sure.
He still faced consequences, but some might say they weren't severe enough, considering the gravity of his actions.
Absolutely. There's a strong argument to be made that the consequences David faced,
Right.
while significant,
Right.
don't fully account for the injustice inflicted upon Uriah and Bathsheba.
Right.
This perspective emphasizes the need for accountability,
Yeah.
even for those in positions of power.
It also raises questions about Bathsheba's role in the story.
Right.
For a long time, she was often depicted as a temptress,
Right.
a seductive figure who led David astray.
Uh-huh.
But that interpretation seems pretty unfair, considering the power imbalance between them.
You're right. More recent interpretations kind of challenge that traditional view.
Right.
They highlight the fact that Bathsheba was summoned by the king,
Yeah.
a man with absolute authority. Refusing his advances could have had serious consequences for her.
It makes you wonder what Bathsheba's perspective on the whole situation was.
Right.
The text focuses primarily on David's experience,
Yeah.
leaving Bathsheba's thoughts and feelings largely unexplored.
That's one of the most intriguing aspects of the story.
Yeah?
It invites us to imagine what Bathsheba might have been thinking and feeling.
Right.
Was she afraid?
Right.
Was she coerced?
Right.
Did she feel any agency in the situation?
It reminds us that there are often multiple perspectives within a story,
Right.
and sometimes those perspectives are silenced or overlooked.
Precisely. It challenges us to read between the lines.
Yeah.
To consider the voices that aren't explicitly represented in the text.
Right.
In a way, the story becomes even more compelling when we start asking those questions.
The story also raises questions about justice and accountability.
Yeah.
David, despite his sin, remains a central figure in biblical history.
Right.
Does this suggest that power can shield people from the full consequences of their actions?
It's a complex issue.
Yeah.
The story doesn't shy away from portraying the devastating impacts of David's choices,
Right.
both on his family and on his own conscience. It acknowledges the enduring presence of sin and its consequences,
Yeah.
even in the lives of those who are ultimately redeemed.
It seems like the story of David and Bathsheba continues to resonate
It does.
because it reflects these timeless truths about human nature.
Right.
We still struggle with the same issues of power, temptation,
Yeah.
and the consequences of our choices.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
This isn't just an ancient tale.
Right.
It's a story that speaks to the ongoing human condition.
Yeah.
It forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves
Okay.
and our capacity for both good and evil, really.
So what can we, as listeners, thousands of years removed from this story, take away from it?
I think its enduring power lies in its ability to provoke introspection. It invites us to ask ourselves difficult questions.
Right.
How do we navigate the complexities of power and desire? What are the limits of forgiveness?
Right.
How do we reconcile our own flaws with our aspirations to live a moral life?
It's a story that challenges us to examine our own moral compass,
Absolutely.
to consider the ripple effects of our actions,
Yeah.
and to grapple with the complexities of faith, justice, and mercy.
It reminds us that even the greatest heroes are flawed,
Yeah.
that even those who stumble can find redemption, and that the consequences of our choices often extend far beyond ourselves.
It's a story that stays with you, prompting reflection long after the podcast ends.
It certainly does.
Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.
Absolutely.
It's been a fascinating exploration of a truly timeless and thought-provoking story.